Okay, Shalom Aleichem, everybody. First of all, Chodesh Tov. It is Rosh Chodesh Shvat. We're very excited for Rosh Chodesh Shvat. There's a lot of blessings to be found, and Be'ezrat Hashem, as we get closer to Tu B'Shvat, not Tu B'Shvat, but Tu Tetzvav, which is the 15th day of Shvat, we're going to talk about the beauty of Tu B'Shvat and the importance of Tu B'Shvat, both for man and for agriculture. But today, we're going to continue with our Sefer HaChinuch. We are up to Mitzvah number 3. So I'm not going to do any review of what we learned in the previous recording because that's relevant to a previous Mitzvah. We're going to start fresh from this Mitzvah, Mitzvah number 3. The third Mitzvah that's commanded in the Torah is the Mitzvah of Gid Hanasheh. Just going to move myself out of the way for a second so you could read it, and then I'll put myself back. I'll be covering the letter E. So mitzvah number 3 is not to eat the sciatic nerve, okay, also known in Hebrew as the Gid Hanasheh. So a little bit of history, which I think is very, very important, and it's going to help us not only to understand this mitzvah, but to understand many, many other mitzvot and other different events that took place in history that the Jews derive lessons from. There is a debate, a very interesting debate, and the debate is as follows. Are patriarchs and matriarchs, right, our forefathers, Avraham, Yitzhak, Yaakov, Moshe, David, Shlomo, obviously Adam Harishon as well, Noah, Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, Leah, Hava, and so on. Were their actions angelic or were their actions human? And again, this is a debate, so you're going to have two sides to the coin. I'm not going to go into too much detail on these 2 points because I don't want to use up our time for this concept because that's not going to really be the crux of what we need to learn, but I do want you to understand the fundamentals. Were they angelic or were they human? So if they were angelic, that means that everything that Avraham, Yitzhak, Yaakov, and so on, everything that they did was calculated to a level that even though to the naked eye it seems like it was human, and it seems like sometimes they felt a desire, sometimes they felt to lust, sometimes they acted out of anger, and different types of actions that they performed, which again to the naked eye would seem are very much human. Nonetheless, they did everything with a calculation that was pre-designed by God, hence the reason why there are patriarchs. So it's not just a coincidence that they are patriarchs, that they are Avraham, Yitzhak, and Yaakov. It's not a coincidence that Hashem chooses to start the nation with Avraham. It's not a coincidence that Chava tries to entice Adam to eat from the one fruit that he is commanded not to eat from in the entire Etz Hagan. And the level that Adam HaRishon was literally the highest level that a human being could possibly be because of the fact that he was just created by God. So you're not talking about someone who had life experiences, that saw different things, has done different things, experimented on different things, good or bad, and now he's in this event and he makes this choice. We're talking about someone who just a few hours ago was created and was created by the hands of God and was made with zero life experiences, fully an adult with all the capabilities and brilliance to do anything that could have ever been done in history, Adam could have done. A small note on that. For example, we know that the Lamborghini was not around, or the wheel, just make it easy, the wheel was not around in the time of Adam HaRishon. Is it fair to say that Adam wasn't wise enough, wasn't smart enough, intellectual enough to innovate a wheel? He couldn't create a wheel, really, Adam HaRishon? And the answer is, of course, he could have. So then why is it that he didn't create a wheel? Why would he want to walk around his entire life and perhaps ride donkeys or horses or whatever he rode? Why wouldn't he want to just create a car? And the answer is because he didn't need one. And because he didn't need one, he didn't take the time to create one. Everything that he did was calculated. He wasn't just wasting his time and experimenting with different elements and materials in this world. Everything that he did was calculated. And therefore, being that he didn't need the wheel, he didn't create the wheel. So Adam HaRishon could have created technology, whatever the updated technology would have been as far as electricity and so on. Yes, Adam HaRishon could have 100%. However, with the brilliance that he had, the intellect that he had, the closeness to Hashem that he had, there's no question that he was capable of doing it. The reason why he did not is because he didn't need it. And that gives us the understanding that everything is kind of calculated in this world. And when something is invented or introduced or developed, there's a reason why it's developed in that specific time versus different times, right? So the microwave was not created in the times of Moshe Rabbeinu because they didn't need the microwave. For whatever the reasons were, they didn't need them. Okay, so the point I'm trying to bring out here is that when we talk about our Avot HaKedoshim and our Imahot HaKedoshot, you're talking about Abraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov, Sarah, Rivka, Hevel, Leah. When Sarai is told about Yitzchak, that she's going to have a baby, so she laughs or she chuckles or whatever her reaction is in the tent, and therefore the Malach says, and now you'll call him Yitzchak because your wife laughed in the tent, right? So this is a lady who, she's barren, she's not able to have children. Someone comes and says, Be'ezat Hashem, you're going to have a child next year, and she's like, this guy is so silly. Who does he think he is? Crazy man. Do we really think that's who Sarah was? Is it possible to even say such a thing? Because when we look at what the Torah says, Kol asher tomar lecha Sarah shema bekola, that Avraham, who is the Avraham Avinu, which everyone knows, right? He was the most famous individual of his times. And on top of that, I think it's fair to say the most famous. He was definitely most known in his times. And on top of that, generations to follow till today, everybody knows Avraham Avinu. And yet you want to tell me that he has to listen to Sarah? So wait, if that's true, which is what the Torah tells us, then what does that say about Sarah? How awesome, how great, how intellectual, how wise, how devoted, how in tuned was Sarah? So when someone comes and tells her, you're going to have a child, and she chuckles or laughs, is she mocking? Is this the Sarah that we know of, right? These are all questions that come up when we study the events that took place with Yitzchak, with putting him on the Akedah, 36 years old, some people say 36, 38-year-old man, developed, fully grown, mature man is put onto an altar. How do all these things play out? So the approach is that they are angelic. Avraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov, our forefathers, our patriarchs and matriarchs are angelic. And therefore, all the actions that they did had a very direct purpose, a specific reason why they were done. So although we might not understand, or we might not know, or we might not know because we're not educated yet to understand, which means that the information is there, we just have to go and seek it. We might not know the reasons why they did what it is that they did and how there is a direct relevance to whatever generation it was meant to be, or even to us to take that that step and say so. Then at the end of the day, it was done for a specific reason. Or there's the second side, and the other side is they're human, which means that they were human beings that when we look back, we can write up a story of how things ended up playing out, right? So Avraham did this, and this is what ended up happening. Yitzchak did this, and this is what happened. Adam did this, and this is what happened. And today, because of what they did, it happens to be, right? It happened. And again, I'm not making light when I say it happens to be. I'm using a human term because in human terms, it happens to be. When a person takes a basketball, a baseball, or a rock, and they throw it out a window, and it happens to be that he missed, and he hits the wind, and he hits a tree, and then the tree falls, and there was a vicious animal that was coming to attack, and then that tree that fell hit him on the head. So that happens to be. He was aiming for the window. He missed. He didn't have good aim today, and that's what happened. So it happens to be that's how it played out. So that being said, we have two different sides to, or again, there's this debate as to were our patriarchs angelic or were they human? And if we're going to say they're human, then the reasons why we see Yehuda and Tamar, the relationship between father-in-law and daughter-in-law, was it really just King David who saw this beautiful woman who probably, was definitely covered modestly, or probably even her face was covered, which kind of makes it hard for him to be attracted to her, but ultimately sees this woman, and then he sleeps with her, and then all these, and then you have all these different stories that take place where now she proves that he's the one that, and she tells him, give me your necklace and give me your staff, and so on. So again, we could go into all the different events, and we could elaborate on each one point for point, and we could pull out the different sides of the debate in each story and see how it plays out. What I would like to do And I'm not pushing you in a certain direction. I'm just sharing with you my personal understanding in addition to what I've been taught and how I understand things clearly or clearer than I would have if I would have taken the other approaches that are patriarchs and matriarchs who are 100% angelic. That means that there's a reason why Moshe was chosen to be the leader of the Jewish people, yet to be born in a way that is so unique, right? They're looking for a child to be born in his times. He ends up to be prematurely born. His mother ends up putting him into a basket, which puts him into a river, which again, just that one little event right there, that in itself is a huge question of what was a mother thinking and how did this child survive. And it just so happens to be that Batya, who is the daughter of the king, out of all people who bathe by the Ye'o, by the river, but out of all people who bathe, it happens to be the daughter of the king. And here she goes. She brings in this child who happens to have been circumcised because he was a Jew, and now growing up in the house of Paro, then no one's going to circumcise him. That means that he would have been circumcised. That means that here you have a Jewish child who becomes the leader of the Jews that's not circumcised, which is a whole big contradiction before itself, even though the Torah wasn't given. I'm well aware. And then he grows up in the house of Paro, and then he becomes from the depth of the house of Paro, from under the nose of he who wants to kill these people. Here you have the person who's going to salvate these people. He ends up getting into a little bit of a confrontation with his father-in-law, because over killing someone or a fight with someone, he runs away to only find out that he's running away to his father-in-law. Again, all these events, piece by piece, one after the other, not to mention all the miracles that took place with the staff and all the 10 plagues. So much going on with this Moshe Rabbeinu. And then to top it all off, towards the end of his life, Hashem comes and tells him, okay, listen, buddy, you're not entering Eretz Yisrael. You're going to die. Let's move on with the show. And he moves on with the show. Okay, if you're telling me I'm going to die, maybe I should do something that I shouldn't, right? Maybe we could bargain here. Now that I know, maybe we could talk this out. Maybe we could work out a plan, something. Nope. Okay, let's move on with the show. If that's how it's supposed to be, then that's how it's supposed to be. So all these things lead us to question ourselves and say, Moshe Rabbeinu, if you were just a human being and you were just the fellow who was raised in Egypt, who became the salvator because you were a devoted individual with a visionary and really had the mindset and the strength to really pull through for people, it's kind of hard to say that. There are too many things that evolve in Moshe Rabbeinu's life for us to be so simple about what happened. And again, this side of the train of thought, of the side of the debate, can be copied and pasted over to all of our forefathers. And the one that I'm going to focus on now is Yaakov Avinu. And the reason why is because this is the story that takes place. So why am I giving you this entire introduction? Because we're going to see that when we talk about the mitzvah of sciatic nerve, Gid Hanasheh, what's the historical background? So not every mitzvah has a historical background. Tefillin has no event that took place in history that therefore we put on tefillin. There's nothing that happened in history that someone strapped a black strap around their arm and their head and now we put on tefillin. However, the mitzvah of sciatic nerve, as we're going to see very, very shortly, is based on an event that took in history. And if we could keep in the back of our minds this concept that our forefathers did things in order to pave the way for us. So it wasn't that they did something on a human level that was just for them. And it was happens to be they did this because this happened, so this happened, so that happened. No. It is 100% by design of Hashem, step for step, word for word, segment for segment, in order for this to turn out the way that it turned out, in order for things in history to turn out the way that they turned out. So that being said, let's apply this with Yaakov Avinu just until the part of the journey that we're going to be relevant to. Yaakov is born a twin. Again, very, very quickly, I'm not giving a whole long story. Yaakov Avinu is born a twin. And clearly from the get-go, there's differences, whether there's physical differences in how they look or whether there are personality differences in the way that they behave and the interests that they have. And as they're growing older, that's only shown more and more and more. Eventually, it comes to a point where, again, fast forwarding, it comes to a point where Yaakov and Esav clearly are not getting along, and they end up becoming enemies to a certain extent because they're both fighting for the love of the father, Yitzchak. Yitzchak, towards the end of his life, has a very hard time seeing, and now he knows he's going to die. And by the way, where does he get this vision impairment? It goes all the way back from Akedat Yitzchak, when the angels, as per the Kabbalah tells us, the Zohar tells us, the angels were watching him about to be slaughtered, and they couldn't understand God's reasoning behind it. So they cried, and the tears from their eyes, which are salty, as we all know, have salt in their eye, has in their tears dripped into Yitzchak, coincidentally dripped into Yitzchak's eyes, and that created a deficiency that over time ended up making him blind, eventually leading him to be blind. Now you look back at just that story alone and you say, an event that happened there, why would that happen? Well, let's fast forward now here. Here comes Yaakov and Esav. Yitzchak is on his deathbed. He wants to give a blessing to his children. And so he says, I want you to come in, then you to come in, whatever the case may be. And of course, again, taking the angelic route, Hashem wants the blessing to come to Yaakov. It's not a coincidence that it played out that way, that Esav the Great, who has everything that he needs in his life, he's popular, he's strong, he could hunt away whatever he wants. He has women and he has clothing, he has everything that he wants. Here he wants this one lentil soup that his brother makes. Really, out of all the steaks that he eats every day and all the access that he has to food, the only one thing he wants is lentil soup. There's nothing else that he wants in his world. He's literally starving for months and months and months that he needs this lentil soup to survive, right? So that in itself puts us in a place to talk about why min ha'adom hazeh, it was called red, double red, adom ha'adom. These are all things that we could talk about, but for now, I'm trying to lead you into a thought process to understand, not to convince you, just to understand how things actually developed and what makes sense here when you look at the story in hindsight. And so because of this, Yitzchak gives the blessing to Yaakov first, and that's the better blessing out of the two. That's the ruler blessing, the one who's going to be more dominant. And then Esav gets wind of it, and I'm going to kill you. So instead of sitting there and say, wait, don't kill me, it's just a silly blessing. What do you care so much? You do have a road anyways, like who cares? It's like saying, I got a chavruta with this person. Like, oh, really, who cares? I don't care for learning anyways, says Esav. And then he ends up running away right now, as if Esav doesn't know where he is. So if you ran away, then Esav could chase you. I'm saying if he wants to kill you, he'll kill you. It's not a problem for him. He's killed many, many people. He's done many terrible things. Not hard for him to hire a hitman or do it himself to go kill his brother, right? But yet, nonetheless, he doesn't touch him for 21 years. And it just so happens to be that he runs to his uncle's house and ends up that there are two girls over there, and he marries both of those girls coincidentally and has the 11 children, because Binyamin wasn't born until a little bit later in the story, and so on and so forth, right? And then let's fast forward. Finally, after 21 years, Yaakov is coming back to his parents' home. All right, he has an army of children. He's coming back to his parents' home, and here we are, that he forgets a couple of cans of tuna, maybe a bottle of soda or whatever it is that he left behind. He leaves behind a few small things. He sends his family forward, and he's like, "Oh, I forgot something. Let me go get back those tuna cans." Really? You have a whole tribe of people here. You have flock. You have your belongings. You have an entire army of people. When I say army, I don't mean fighters. I mean a whole group, a tribe of people here. And you're gonna go back to go get a couple of tuna cans that you forgot, which that has lessons before itself of appreciation, even the small things in our life. But again, there's so many lessons we could derive. And here he goes back, and lo and behold, when he goes back, he bumps into an angel, fights with an angel. His angel now comes forward. Who are these people? This is my wife. This is my children. Right? The whole story gets messy, and he fights with this angel the entire night. He gets a hip dislocation because of it, which ultimately leads to a certain impalement where he's disabled moving forward. And this is the story. Again, it continues further, but this is the story of Gid Hanasheh in the Torah, where Yaakov and the messenger of Esav have a battle. They fight the whole night. The entire night they fight. And he only gets injured towards the morning, which at that point, well, right before he gets injured, he tells him, okay, buddy, enough is enough. I'm looking at my watch. It's almost time to say Shema. Sorry, can't fight with you anymore. Hashem comes first. And then he says Shema, and then so on and so forth. So now there's so many unclear points in the story of you're fighting the entire night. You can't win. Like, don't you get tired after 5-6 hours of fighting with someone? And then towards the end of the battle, only do you get hurt because you're telling him, like, enough, I can't fight with you. And then the angel ends up giving him a blessing. So many things going on here, a name change, so many things going on here that don't make sense on a normal level, right? When you go to war with someone, you don't give them a blessing afterwards. Maybe that's what should happen anyways, but ultimately that's not what normally happens in the human world. So that being said, then why is it that Yaakov Avinu goes through this whole story with the messenger of Esav, fights with him the whole night, and all the events that take place? And the answer to that is that, taking the angelic side of the debate, Yaakov Avinu was paving the way for his children, which is us. He was paving the way to teach us how to deal with certain situations that we are going to come up with in life that have to do with Esav. And the lesson that we're going to learn is, and I want to share with you now, and then we'll go and review it as we see it in the slides when you take your notes, is that we are a nation of negotiation. Okay, the Jewish people try to negotiate everything we possibly can. All of the paths that we take is the way of shalom, peace, non-confrontational, always to be peaceful, try to do things in a way that is always about leading to peace without violence. But yet there are times where when you are opposed by Esav, you can't just negotiate. Although you've negotiated the whole night, yes, going back to the story of Yaakov, you've negotiated the whole night. At one point, if there has to be physical violence, then there has to be physical violence. You need to go to war, you need to go to war. There's a certain level where when you're about to cross that line because of the fight, now it can't be just a verbal fight or a negotiation. It has to be a physical fight as well. And that would be if our religion is on the line, where Yaakov says, I have to say Shemana. Okay, you want to fight with me all night? No problem. I have nothing that I have to do right now as far as prayer or mitzvot, so I have no problem going to war with you. But once you're coming close to crossing that line of now I can't do my mitzvot, sorry, I cannot allow you to get in the way between me and Hashem. And if it means I have to go to war, I'm going to go to war with you, but you need to get out of my way. And that's what Yaakov teaches us, that when we deal with certain nations of the world, yes, we would love to be able to have just nice negotiations, nice talk, friendly conversations, sit down and write contracts and all these different things. So it's very nice. But ultimately, at the end of the day, that too has a limit. And that too doesn't work at one point. And at one point, you have to draw the line and say no more. And now come the tanks. And that's the end of it. And that's the way that you end up calming and controlling the beast. You end up putting things into a safe place where you're not being hurt and your religion is not being compromised, risked, or heaven forbid, put on the line. A little bit later, we'll talk about the dynamic of Israel versus the Arab nations, which I think is a very important lesson, but we'll see that as we go along. Okay, so that's my introduction to Gid Hanasheh, because it has a historical background to Yaakov Avinu, a very tight historical background to Yaakov Avinu. And we'll see it as it comes along. Okay, so let's move on. So first of all, this is the mitzvah of the sciatic nerve, also known as mitzvah shelo le'echol gid hanasheh, not to eat the sciatic nerve. Not to eat means it's a don't do mitzvah. It's a mitzvah lo ta'aseh. It's a biblical mitzvah of lo ta'aseh, as it says in the pasuk, Vayishlach Yaakov. Excuse me. Parashat Vayishlach Yaakov, that's the name of the parasha. It's in Sefer Bereshit. Yeshba mitzvat lo ta'aseh achat. It has one mitzvat lo ta'aseh. V'hi azharat gid hanasheh, the mitzvah of gid hanasheh, the sa'ak shene'emar, as it says in Bereshit. Al ken lo yochelu bnei Yisrael et gid hanasheh. Therefore, right? So you see that it's tied down to a story. Therefore, Bnei Israel shall not eat the sciatic nerve, asher al kaf hayerech, that is found on the thigh. And again, we'll talk about what kaf yerech means. It's important to understand that, so we know how we found this nerve as the nerve that is prohibited, right? Because it doesn't say, well, it says gid hanasheh, but we have to understand what exactly that means, and the Torah describes it in saying kaf yerech. Ad hayom hazeh. Anytime that you see in the Torah ad hayom hazeh, It's an everlasting testimony that will never be changed, that can never be changed, that religion cannot change, people cannot change. So anytime you see Ad Hayom Hazeh, we see this, by the way, when the Torah names certain parts of the world, that it should be called Be'er Lehai, for example, Ad Hayom Hazeh, till this day. Excuse me. So it will always be called this name, or this, where we see here Gid Hanasheh, will never change, no matter how we manage to morph the animals and what we manage to do to make them from silver to gold. At the end of the day, this mitzvah will always be relevant. So, and this is not to say that the others are not. So you don't need to have it in every mitzvah, but it does point it out in certain areas where there's potential of change, cloning, and certain, and so on and so forth. Therefore, Bnei Israel should not eat the Gid Hanasheh, and that is found in the thigh ad hayom hazeh, till today. Ki naga bekaf yerech Yaakov. The word naga has a few meanings to it. Naga means to touch, but neka, which is a dislocation or a sprain or strain, is also derived not in modern Hebrew, but from the Midrash, al tikra naga ela neka, which is what explains the actual injury that he had. That's where he was injured. Okay, so the mitzvah is not to eat the sciatic nerve. You have it here in English. Parashat Vayishlach has one do not do commandment, the prohibition of eating the sciatic nerve, as it is stated. Therefore, Bnei Israel shall not eat the sciatic nerve. And then I didn't add the last piece of Yaakov Avinu because I explained it. All right, very well. Let's move on. Mishal Sheh mitzvah. What is the root of this mitzvah? Look at this beautiful root and the reasons why we have this mitzvah. Kedei shetihiyeh remez leYisrael. It should be a hint or a reminder for the Jewish people. She'af al pi sheyizbelu tzarot rabot bagalut miyad ha'amim umiyad bnei Esav. That even though we are going to suffer tremendous pain and a lot of suffering from the different and exile. So we got tzarot rabot bagalut. We have suffering, pain in exile. Miyad ha'amim, from the other nations. Umiyad bnei Esav, and from the descendants of Esav. So this is a worldly message. You should always be certain and always be assured that you will not be erased from this world. You'll always be around the Jewish people. Ela le'olam ya'amod zar'am v'shemam. Your name and your offsprings will always be standing tall and straight. V'yavo lahem go'el v'yiga'alam miyad tsar. And there will be a redeemer that will redeem you from all the challenges that you have. Now again, what does this have to do with anything? Why is this the reason behind the mitzvah? And the answer is, let's look at the fight. Yaakov Avinu goes to a fight with the messenger, and there's a battle with the other nation, constantly oppressing and oppressing and oppressing. And here you have Yaakov, who's not a fighter like Esav. He's not an individual who goes to war. You're talking about someone who is Yaakov Ishtam Yoshev Ohalim. He sits in the tent, he learns Torah, he's a soft-spoken person. His hands are not rough from someone who is at battle, but they're soft from one who's a scribe and a sage. But yet, and he goes to war with the opposition, with this warrior. You know, when you look at that and you say, "Oh my, what's the chances?" You got this yeshiva guy against this MMA star, world champion. What's the chances? There are no chances. The answer is relax. Hashem is in control, and that even if you see, and it seems like there's no way out, because it seems like the Jewish people are going to be wiped off the planet at this time, because of the fact that they're not skilled in this war and they're not skilled in fighting and all these different types of things. Don't worry about it, because Hashem will always save the Jewish people. So I don't want to get too far off into the world of conversation on this topic, because there's so much that I'd like to say. I'm just going to introduce the Holocaust, which is a very, very, very big topic. It's a huge topic. However, the point that I want to derive is, look at how one of the goals of the Holocaust was to wipe out all the Jews on the planet. And sadly, with a broken heart and much anger inside, I say they were successful, right? 6 million plus. There's no question that there was plus the 6 million plus Jews that were killed, right? In addition to the fact that 6 million means who knows how many more millions, 100, 200, 300 million later that were killed, because of the fact that they weren't born. Meaning that if these 6 million Jews were alive, then they would have more children that would have more children 70 years later, you would have so many more people, and 100 years past that, or 140 years later, you'd have that many more people, and then keep on going with the mathematics. 210 years later, you'd have so really there were so many more than 6 million people that were killed. At the end of the day, when we go back to the root of the killing, the murder, when we look at the Holocaust, they wiped out complete cities, complete towns were just wiped out. Jews were just literally slaughtered all over, gas chambers and other methods, and they were wiped out. And here you have the Jews looking up and saying, oh no, this is the end of the Jewish people, because this is working. They're able to kill so many people. Again, of course, there were other people that were killed as well, but we're focusing on our point. And here the Torah says, don't worry, the mitzvah of Gid Hanasheh, the battle between Yaakov Avinu and Malacho or Saro Shel Esav, teaches you that even if you're at the bottom, and even if it looks like you're about to get squashed and there's nothing left, don't worry, you're going to be forever lasting, and your name will always be there. The concept of Jew will always be there, even though unfortunately nowadays, in some ways, worse than many wars is the war to assimilation, where Jews are unfortunately assimilating, forgetting their religion. And unfortunately, the assimilation is even happening in our communities. And I think I'm looking at my watch to make sure we're good with time. I want to focus on this for a minute, because I think that is super, super important and relevant to the battle that Yaakov fought for us. We live in a generation today where I always give this example. I'm not going to say from which community that I teach in, but from a community that I teach in where 10 years ago, when I would teach in this community, you had children, the teenagers who would come to my classes that would never walk into a shul without wearing a kippah. There's nothing we'll talk about. You can't, you go, you open the door, there's a kippah there, you put it on your head, you walk in. You can't, it's kind of like the door is locked unless you know the code, and the code to get in is wearing a kippah. Like, who else would go to a shul without wearing a kippah, right? It was simple, it was obvious. And fast forwarding 10 years, nowadays, when I teach this same community, and it's an evolution of the next generation or the younger group of teenagers, we find that they could come into shul, and they're not wearing a kippah. And it's okay that they're not wearing it. It's not okay with me. It's not okay with the shul, but it's okay within their realm and in their eyes that it's not the door is locked until I put a kippah on. I'm coming into shul for the event versus I'm coming into shul in the shul and there is an event. So there's a difference between coming into shul and there happens to be an event in shul, or I'm coming to an event and that event happens to be, and it happens to be that there's a shul around me as well. And the difference would be that in case number one, shul comes first, and therefore first you live by the rules that are relevant in the shul, and then afterwards comes the event that takes place. And the second opinion, or the second option, or the way looking at it, the difference would be is that the shul is secondary. So you don't have to worry about the respect of the shul as much, but rather the event is more important. So when we look at assimilation, yes, there is an outside assimilation where unfortunately you have Jews that are marrying non-Jews and so on. And a lot of times there are Jews that don't even know that they're Jews, or they don't see the importance of being a Jew, and therefore for them marrying a non-Jew or having relationships with non-Jews that eventually leads to marriage, whether it be their generation or the next generation, is definitely a very big cause. But I think scarier to a certain point is where within our communities, we're lowering the level of the expectation of what our religion has to be like. And that is 100% a disaster from the sense of assimilation. When a child doesn't have to think to themselves that a kippah is an important device in their religion, it's just something that, at times you have to wear. Make sure you have one folded somewhere in your glove compartment, perhaps. Eventually, that's going to change. Eventually, in who knows, hopefully it'll change for the better. But if not, then for the worst, chas v'shalom, you have people who will stop putting the kippah in their glove compartment. They won't have a kippah in every one of their suit jackets just in case they end up in a Jewish event and they happen not to have a kippah with them. That's just not going to be anymore, right? And then what happens is we segue from the kippah was the one gift that was given to every guest in the wedding, right? You had a kippah and it said the wedding of, and so on and so forth, and you had a bencher that said the wedding of, and then eventually it could evolve into, why am I giving out kippot? I mean, people in the wedding are not wearing kippah anyway, so what's the point in giving out a kippah? Let me give out something else. Give out a handkerchief. It's more useful. Give out a pair of shoes when right inside the wedding of. I mean, they're more useful, right? The train of thought goes from, the reason why I give a kippah by a wedding is because I want you to remember me with something that you do all the time, right? You bench from a bencher every day, or every Shabbat for sure. So therefore, if you're going to use that bencher and my name is on it, you're going to remember me through the bencher. But if you don't bench, then the bencher becomes secondary and useless because the point is completely thrown out the window because you're not using it anyhow. It defeats the purpose. So eventually we'll stop making benchers. We'll give out flowers, right? And then we took away from the whole point was it's a Jewish wedding, so you give out Jewish articles. You give out Judaica because that's the whole. It's all about that. And then it evolves into it's just a wedding. Simple. So why should I give out something Jewish when it's just a wedding? Anyways, it's not going to be used, right? So there's a certain element and there's a train of thought here that's happening that Yaakov Avinu, which is around 3,200 years ago, a little bit more than that, 3,600 years ago, he fought for that, for us. No, 4,000 and 4,100 years ago, around there. He fought for us to be able to have that kippah by the wedding. He fought against assimilation, and he not only did he fight verbally, but rather he also fought to the point where he was physically injured and disabled because of the fact that he believed so much in what was important to him and not to allow his religion to be sidelined. And therefore, it's time for Shema. I'm done with my battle with you, and now we go on, and I'm going to physically have to get you out of my way. All right, so there's a very, 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 very important lesson here behind the Gid Hanasheh. It's not just don't eat the filet mignon, which we'll talk about a little bit later when we get to the technicalities. It's really a lot more than that. There's a lot deeper than that. There's a very important message that really is going to preserve the Jewish people. Okay, awesome. So let's do. We have just a few minutes left before this period is over. So we're going to read the rest of this page here, and then we'll move on to the next recording. Okay, so ubezichram tamid. I'm up to the next part here. Ubezichram tamid inyan zeh. By remembering this mitzvah and remembering where it came from, they will always stand with their beliefs and their righteousness forever. And again, based on my explanation now, I think you could see how that makes sense, right? The more we focus on our religion, the stronger we'll be, the less assimilation, the less we'll be knocked over, the stronger we'll be. One of the things that we do in high school is always teach the kids about the importance of their religion and their state, right? The land of Israel. And their religion, Judaism, because you're going to go out to college, you're going to get challenged, right? It wasn't Israel, it's not the state of Israel, it's Palestine and all this. Okay, what's the history? You need to know the history. You need to know how to respond. It's not good enough just to live in a Jewish bubble and say, I'm a Jew because I live in a bubble, and that's good enough. That's not good enough, unfortunately, especially nowadays. It never was good enough, but definitely nowadays, because you need to have the ammunition to respond to those who are going to oppose you. And there will be those that will oppose you, whether it's in your immediate circle of your family, or whether it's in a bigger picture in your work, or in the industry that you're in, or whether it be in school, and so on and so forth. Okay. And the hint to this in the Torah is from, or the background, if you'd like, for this is the angel that fought against Yaakov Avinu, Sheba b'Kabbalah, that it is brought down in the Zohar, in the Kabbalah, Bereshit Rabbah, Shehaya Saro Shel Esav. It was the messenger or the officer or the angel of, again, different interpretations of Esav. Ratza leYaakov min ha'olam. He wanted to uproot Yaakov from this world. Hu v'zar'o v'lo yachol lo. So this officer of Esav tried to kill Yaakov, or to at least spiritually uproot him from this world and say, hey, join us, come to your brother Esav, make peace with him. Don't worry about religion. It's okay. You're human. We're all the same, and so on. And he tried the whole night. He tried convincing him, and it wasn't working. So because he saw that he couldn't convince him in words and get him to assimilate, this angel hit him on his thigh, and that caused that disability, physical disability. The descendants of Esav bring pain and sorrow to the descendants of Yaakov. And at the end, at the times of Mashiach, of course, there will be redemption. There will be salvation from the descendants of Esav. So this is the first step in the mitzvah of sciatic nerve, the reasoning behind it that's tied to the history. And Be'ezat Hashem, when we move forward, we're going to learn about the details of where to find, how to find, where to get its name from, less historical background, more technical on the halacha. Be'ezat Hashem. So Chodesh Tov, have a wonderful day, and Be'ezat Hashem, we will continue in our next recording.